The year is 1948. The world stands at a crossroads. In the ashes of World War II, a new nation is about to be born, and with it, a conflict that will redefine the Middle East for generations to come. The British mandate in Palestine was collapsing. After 3 decades of tension, Britain decided to withdraw, leaving behind a land divided by fear, faith, and foreign promises. The United Nations had voted to partition Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab, but the decision had only deepened the wounds. For Jews, the UN plan was a long-awaited lifeline. For Palestinians, it was the loss of their homeland. In the final days of the British mandate, chaos spread across Palestine. Jewish militias like the Haganah prepared for war, while Arab villagers armed themselves to defend their towns. Clashes broke out in Jerusalem, Haifa, and Jaffa. Roads became battlegrounds. Neighbors turned into enemies. It was no longer a political disagreement. It was a war for existence. Third, on May 14, 1948, as British forces withdrew from Jerusalem, David Ben-Gurion stood before a small gathering in Tel Aviv and proclaimed, "We hereby declare the establishment of the State of Israel." Outside, sirens wailed, and radio stations across the Arab world announced war. Within hours, armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq crossed the borders. For Israel, it was a war of survival. For the Arab states, it was a war to save Palestine. In the early days, the balance of power was uncertain. The newly formed Israel Defense Forces were outnumbered and outgunned. Yet, fueled by determination and the memory of centuries of persecution, they fought fiercely. Arab forces captured parts of Jerusalem and besieged the Jewish quarter in the south. Egyptian troops advanced toward Tel Aviv. But the tide soon began to turn. As the war intensified, Jewish militias consolidated under a unified command. Weapons began arriving from Czechoslovakia, the first major arms deal for the new state. Meanwhile, internal divisions among Arab armies weakened their campaign. The country had its own political goals. Jordan sought control of the West Bank, Egypt focused on Gaza, and Syria targeted the north. The dream of a united Arab liberation soon began to crumble. While battles raged on, ordinary people paid the highest price. Entire Palestinian villages were emptied, some fleeing the violence, others forced out by military operations. More than 700,000 Palestinians became refugees, scattered across neighboring Arab countries. They called it Nakba, the catastrophe. For them, it was not just a war, it was the loss of home, history, and identity. For the Jewish population, the same events carried a different meaning. After centuries of exile and persecution, they now had a homeland. The war, despite its tragedy, was seen as a rebirth, the realization of a dream nurtured for 2,000 years. But that dream came at a cost. Thousands were killed, cities were divided, and a deep scar was left on both peoples. By early 1949, after months of fierce fighting, Israel had not only survived, it had expanded. The new armistice lines, known as the Green Line, gave Israel more territory than the UN plan had originally proposed. Jordan took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, while Egypt retained Gaza. The Palestinian dream of an independent state vanished, replaced by occupation and displacement. So, when the guns finally fell silent, the Middle East was transformed forever. For Israelis, victory meant independence. For Palestinians, defeat meant exile. 2 nations were now born, one recognized by the world, the other left stateless. Families were torn apart, villages erased, and generations grew up behind borders that had never existed before. In the years that followed, refugee camps rose across Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. Children were born in tents, their parents still holding keys to homes they could never return to. In Israel, waves of Jewish immigrants arrived from Europe and Arab countries, filling new towns and rebuilding their lives. The contrast was stark, one people rebuilding, another waiting to return. The 1948 war was more than a battle for territory. It was a collision of 2 dreams. For Jews, it was the promise of security after centuries of suffering. For Palestinians, it was the beginning of a struggle for recognition and return. Both stories are real. Both are painful. And both continue to shape the world today. In the aftermath of 1948, no true peace emerged, only uneasy armistices. The borders drawn were never meant to last, and resentment on both sides grew stronger. As the dust settled, one truth became clear: the conflict was far from over. In the next episode of Roots of Conflict, we follow what came next: the decades of tension, the rise of Palestinian resistance, and the wars that followed as the dream of peace slipped further away.